What is kryptonite for most middle-aged, crusty white Republicans? A very powerful and intelligent black woman with a moral compass. And that's exactly who Jasmine Crockett is. And that's why the Republicans fear her. It's why they fear people like AOC, a woman of color, who's intelligent, who's worked hard in her life to get to where she is. It's why they fear Mom Donnie. Crusty, middle-aged, white Republicans who would defend David Duke before they defended Jasmine Crockett. What does it say about them? Speaking of defending white supremacists, I think one person that does a great job of doing that is a guy by the name of Jack Posobiec. He did my show years ago. I've debated him multiple times on the Piers Morgan show. He's the idiot, and that's exactly what he is, the idiot who started the Pizzagate conspiracy theory and put innocent lives at risk when he said Hillary Clinton was running some sort of underage sex trafficking ring in a pizza restaurant basement. Now, obviously, that wasn't true. He never retracted, he never apologized, and people's lives were on the line. In fact, a guy showed up with a gun at that restaurant. And that was because of Jack Posobiec and his irresponsible lies on social media that I guess made him famous, because if you make up lies on the right today on social media, you become a star within the Republican Party. Well, now, Jack Posobiec is lying about the murder of George Floyd. Have a listen to what he had to say.
I think it's been enough time. I think people need to just hear this plainly. And we covered the trial of Derek Chauvin day in, day out. I covered every single minute of it. And I'm just going to come out here and say something as plain as I can. Derek Chauvin did not murder George Floyd. Derek Chauvin, the police officer, did not murder George Floyd. We as a country need to have a system of criminal justice. We do. But we can't have a system of political justice, of woke justice. It was woke justice that put Derek Chauvin behind bars. It was woke justice that got O.J. Simpson out of prison when he killed his ex-wife, nearly chopped her head off, and killed a waiter. This country stands at a precipice right now. Are we going to allow the forces of political correctness, political opinion, public opinion, mob rule, and mob justice to determine the course of our country? Or are we going to live in an ordered society where we can look at facts, we can look at reason, we can use rational argument to determine the outcome of events? We can't redefine murder because we want a police officer to go to jail and because we want hashtag justice for George Floyd. The regime launched a color revolution, a domestic color revolution in 2020 in this country because they wanted to enact domestic change in our country. And they used and exploited the shocking and tragic death of Mr. Floyd as a means to their end. Derek Chauvin didn't receive a fair trial, because here's how a trial like that would go. Was this hold permitted under the Minneapolis Police Code? Well, yes, it was. In fact, there are training slides. I pulled them up within a day of the video coming out. Shows you exactly how to do that. Number two, what did the autopsy say? The autopsy said there were no evidence of life-threatening injuries, and the autopsy said there was a lethal dose of fentanyl and other drugs in Mr. Floyd's system.
Okay, so let me be very clear here. There's a lot of lies that we're going to go over, but Jack Posobiec is a racist piece of human garbage. Let me just put that out there to begin, because I guarantee you if George Floyd was white and that officer was black, Jack could care less. Let's just be very clear on this, right on the open, to talk about Jack Posobiec and his opinions on George Floyd. He's a racist piece of garbage. Number two, there were two autopsies in this case that both found that George Floyd died of homicide. What does that mean? It means that unless somebody forced George Floyd to put drugs in his system, which clearly there was no evidence that that took place. The drugs had no bearing on his death. They both ruled it a homicide. But you see, Jack Posobiec won't talk about that. He'll talk about the alleged lethal dosage that was in his system. Well, if it was that lethal and they thought that he died from drugs, then they wouldn't have called it a homicide. You dumbass, racist piece of human MAGA trash is what you are. But you see, you won't hear Jack Posobiec saying that. Number two, murder was not redefined. When he talks about the training from these officers, they are specifically reporting on training of putting your knee on somebody's neck when they are not handcuffed, on their stomach, and not going anywhere, not resisting. George Floyd was not only not resisting at that moment in those 8 minutes, but his hands were handcuffed behind his back. Nowhere does it say that if someone is complaining that they can't breathe and they're struggling to breathe, they're handcuffed, they're on their stomach, and they're not going anywhere, that you should put your knee on their neck for 8 minutes. That is not training, and that is why Derek Chauvin is a convicted murderer. And anybody that tells you otherwise is either a racist or completely ill-informed, or maybe both. But what gets me very upset about Jack Posobiec is just it's not fair that Derek Chauvin didn't get a fair trial. You see, because if a black man is murdered and a white man goes to jail, according to Jack Posobiec and many of his Klansmen friends, it's not fair. Right? It's not fair that 3 white men went to jail after lynching Ahmaud Arbery. It's not fair. But you see, when Donald Trump gets convicted in a court of law, it's not fair either. It's not fair. Maybe the reason why you say it's not fair, and by the way, Derek Chauvin had the chance to defend himself in a court of law, maybe the reason why you say it's not fair because you want to normalize black people being murdered by white police officers. Let me repeat myself one more time, the lies of Jack Posobiec. By the way, Jack is the guy who started the Pizzagate lie and scandal that put lives at risk. To kind of narrow it down for you, fact and fiction, to talk about, they talk about the drugs in George Floyd's system. If the drugs in his system had any bearing on his death, they would not have ruled it a homicide. 2 autopsies, 2 very experienced people that did these autopsies, both testified that he died from homicide, not from drugs. So it is completely irrelevant how much fentanyl was in his system because both autopsies concluded that he did not die from the drugs in his system. Yet Jack Posobiec wants to say he had a lethal dose in his system. Jack is not a doctor. Jack did not perform the autopsy, thank God. And both autopsies found that he died from homicide. Homicide meaning a knee on the neck for 8 minutes when he couldn't breathe. Number 2. If Good Samaritans weren't recording, the police report would have said that he resisted. And Derek Chauvin would still be a police officer today. I think that's also very important to note. Number 3, Derek Chauvin used to work at a nightclub. Members of that nightclub who worked with Derek Chauvin said that he used the N-word. Number 4, there's another video of Derek Chauvin putting his knee on a young black teenager, similarly to what he did to George Floyd, which was also illegal. And last but not least, Derek Chauvin was convicted in a court of law. And while white supremacists like Jack Posobiec, and that's exactly who he is, he's a white supremacist turd who probably will be late to his Klan rally tonight, will say, it's not fair. It's not fair. Kyle Rittenhouse gets off. That was fair, right? 3 people end up dead. That was fair. But when a white man goes to jail and is a convicted murderer, and a black man, regardless of what he did in his past, because it's irrelevant to the story, then it's not fair. It is absolutely and positively disgraceful that the Ben Shapiros of the world, the Jack Posobiecs of the world, and it's funny how they're all white. Don't you find that interesting? You know, I don't hear Tim Scott, who's despicable, or any black Republicans saying that Derek Chauvin should get a pardon. I wonder why that is. Byron Donalds' son isn't saying that Derek Chauvin should get a pardon. Why is that? Because they know the truth. They know that it was one of their own that was murdered by a white man. But it's always those crusty, middle-aged, white MAGA Republicans that want to get a white person off for murdering a black person. It's despicable. It's disgusting. And let me be very clear once again. Derek Chauvin is a convicted murderer. If Derek Chauvin's knee isn't on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes, George Floyd is still alive today. And any drugs he had in his system is irrelevant because there were autopsies that concluded that it was a homicide. So don't let any of these right-wing turds and their white hoods distract you.